Cinema is a universal language that viewers use to transport themselves in different corners of the globe, and sometimes in imaginary and fantastic worlds. Cinema is used to escape the real world, but also to discover it. That's why African cinema is so important. It is a big part of history as it was often used to denounce political injustice and failing political systems. But the history of African cinema is a lot more complex than simply a cry for change from talented filmmakers. It is Africans expressing themselves in ways only they can, which makes for a very unique point of view. But where did it all start? Right after the invention of cinema in France in 1895, cinema came to Africa, where its development was shaped by European colonialism, and most movies were meant to be colonialism propaganda. Africans were portrayed as savages, cannibals, or unintelligent and submissive beings. Movies such as Tarzan of the Apes, Congorilla, and Voodoo Vengeance come to mind. Until independence, films in Africa were financed, directed, and distributed by Europeans and Americans. It was only after independence in the 1960s that an independent film industry was able to develop. While Africans were prohibited to make movies of their own by the Laval Decree in French colonies and systematic racism in others, their involvement in the production helped aspiring filmmakers to learn and develop their skills in filmmaking. One of those filmmakers was the legend Ousmane Sembène, the Senegalese filmmaker who is seen as the father of African cinema.
For many years, the common idea of world cinema history in the West was pretty cut and dried. Japan, for the most part, you had Kurosawa, Ozu, Mizoguchi. Russia, Eisenstein, Dovzhenko, Podofkin. India was Sajid Ray. And Africa, the entire continent, was Ousmane Sembène.
His 1963 debut film, Borom Saret, or The Wagoner in English, is regarded as the first true African film ever. Black Girl, also a Ousmane Sembène film, was the first African film to gain international recognition. It showed the despair of an African woman who has to work as a maid in France. It won the Prix Jean Vigo in 1966. Other famous directors include Djibril Diop Mambéty, also from Senegal, who directed the critically acclaimed Touki Bouki. Youssef Chanin from Egypt, who is best known for the 1958 movie Cairo Station. Med Undo from Mauritania, Idrissa Ouedraogo, and Gaston Kabore from Burkina Faso, and Souleymane Cissé from Mali. The 70s were the golden years for African films, as they were consistently present at the Cannes Film Festival. Burkina Faso, although a relatively poor country, was the undisputed center of African films. The films were mainly concerned with issues of culture and national identity, with the directors wanting to focus on the cultural legacy of African people through films, as well as to use these films in the development of African nations. In terms of production, Algeria and Tunisia flourished the most as the movie industry seemed to develop faster. Egypt, on the other hand, kept a steady evolution throughout the 70s, as it had more experience and a sustainable formula. However, from the 1980s, these industries became increasingly dominated by films made for general audiences, and quality rapidly declined. By the early 2000s, most theaters in Africa were closed, with only a handful of companies functioning and providing the real movie experience. The lack of funding has forced talented filmmakers to compromise and make lesser films, which has made it difficult for African films to stand out the way they used to. From time to time, there are movies such as Tsotsi or The Man Who Sold His Skin that stand out on an international level, but it just does not happen as often as it should, and for Africa to produce quality films due to a nearly non-existent industry. Among the former British colonies, only Nigeria has built a sizable film industry, thanks largely to the efforts of director Ola Balogun, who adapted Yoruba plays for cinema and who, between 1972 and 1982, produced nearly a film a year. Today, Nigeria's Nollywood is the second largest movie industry in the world in terms of production, only behind India, producing over 2,000 movies a year. Nowadays, video films are the major art form in Nigeria. The South African film industry was often cast aside for a long time within the world of African cinema because it was dominated by white filmmakers who frequently used movies to reinforce racial divisions. The first black director in South Africa was Gibson Kente. At the moment, South Africa is taking the lead on the African continent in the production and distribution of films. Though its industry is still young, it is growing at an encouraging rate and has showed potential for the future. Although funding is a big problem across the continent, there is still a lot of passion for filmmaking, as seen with movies like Who Killed Captain Alex, a movie made with $0 but a million passion.
Then who killed Captain Alex? Who? What the fuck?
There are still conventions and associations such as the Pan-African Federation of Filmmakers that still care about the art of filmmaking. With the world of social media and a better access to technology, cinema as a whole is better than it's ever been. However, Africa as a continent has been ravaged by political disasters, and the state of the film industry throughout the continent is only a reflection of that. Filmmakers like Usman Sembene had tried to give Africans their voice back through expressive filmmaking, but such things would not be allowed today as most African countries suffer from a lack of freedom of speech. With all that being said, some government programs such as USAID's Young African Leaders Initiative have contributed positively to the development of the cinema industry on the continent. In Niger, for instance, Aisha Maki, an award-winning documentary filmmaker and founding CEO of production company Taboo Productions, has benefited from such funding support. In turn, her organization has donated several films to Nigerian television during the pandemic. With the domination of streaming today, the issue of funding could be overturned or at the very least lessened. As we consider possible futures including streaming for African cinema, it is essential to acknowledge that developing such industry in African countries is a complex mission, which requires institutions to be built, education and communications technology to be enhanced, with the ultimate goal of supporting filmmakers and valuing human life through telling human stories.
Je me suis trouvé à l'âge de 40 ans en vadrouille à travers l'Afrique, au Congo du temps de Lumumba. 40 ans, j'avais 40 ans. Quand j'ai pris conscience que le cinéma facilitait la prise de conscience, parce que le cinéma c'est un meeting permanent avec le public. Dans une salle de cinéma, vous avez catholiques, musulmans, gaullistes, communistes et tout ça. Quand le film est bon, chacun perçoit et accepte ce qu'il veut. C'est ça qui m'a amené au cinéma pour mieux poursuivre ma quête de militantisme.
Balumuna yo yo yo. Balumuna. Balumuna yo yo yo. Ludinga kwetwe balumuna. Ludinga kwetwe balumuna. Balumuna yo yo yo. Balumuna yo yo yo. Balumuna yo yo yo. Balumuna yo yo yo.
Why are you running? Why are you running?